The subject of straight identifying men who have sex with other men is a fascinating one, in that it shines a light on some extremely potent, personal concepts pertaining to identity and sexuality and one's place in society. That's why some sociologists and other researchers have been very eager to seek out such men and hear them explain how they fit same-sex sexual activity into their conception of heterosexuality. The latest such research comes in the journal Sexualities, from Hector Carrillo and Amanda Hoffman of Northwestern University. They conducted 100 interviews, with men who identified as straight but sought out casual sex with men online, hoping to better understand this population. This video consists of snippets from those interviews, which were primarily conducted online by 3 female researchers, and at the end Carrillo and Hoffman sum up what they found. They interpret that they are exclusively or primarily attracted to women, and many also conclude that they have no sexual attraction to men in spite of their desire to have sex with men. They define sexual attraction as a combination of physical and emotional attraction, and they assess that their interest in women includes both, while their interest in men is purely or mainly sexual, not romantic or emotional. Moreover, some perceive that they are not drawn toward male bodies in the same way as they are drawn to female bodies, and some observe that the only physical part of a man that interests them is his penis. Men in the latter group do not find men handsome or attractive, but they do find penises attractive, and they thus see penises as living dildos or, in other words, disembodied objects of desire that provide a source of sexual pleasure. Finally, as a management strategy for judging that their sexual interest in women is greater and more intense than their interest in men, they sometimes limit their repertoires of same-sex sexual practices or interpret them as less important than their sexual practices with women. That way, they can tell themselves that their sexual interest in women is unbounded, while their sexual interest in men is not. All this contributes to their sense that they qualify as being called straight or heterosexual, even when some also recognize that their sexualities do indeed differ from exclusive heterosexuality, which in turn leads them to adopt secondary descriptors of their sexual identities. As indicated by the variety of terms that they used, those descriptors often reinforce a perception that, as a sexual orientation category, heterosexuality is elastic instead of rigid, that some degree of same-sex desire and behavior need not automatically push an individual out of the heterosexual category. And while some men are willing to recognize that their sexual behaviors might qualify their being called bisexual, and they may privately identify with that label, they feel that there is no contradiction between holding a private awareness of being bisexual and a public persona as straight or heterosexual. Again, this conclusion is strengthened by a lack of social incentives to adopt bisexual identities. It's interesting to keep that interpretation in mind as you listen to the interview snippets. Take, for example, the men who sought to make it very clear that while they sometimes got with men, they really liked women. I know what I like. I like pussy. I like women. The more the merrier. I would kiss a woman. Anywhere. I can barely hug a man. I do have a healthy sexual imagination and wonder about other things in the sexual realm I've never done. Sometimes I get naughty and explore. That's how I see it," said Reggie, who is 28 years old. "Women are hot. I can see a beautiful woman walk down the street and I instantly can become hard and get horny. I don't think I've ever seen a guy walking by and got a boner. Also, I would not want to kiss or make out with them or love them. They would be more like a sexual experience," said Charlie, who is 32 years old. Some of the men did think that their behavior possibly qualified them as bisexual, but didn't quite want to take the step of identifying as such. "I think everybody is a little bi. Isn't that what this research is about? There's the Kinsey scale. It's not like Bush saying you're either with us or with the terrorists. I think I'm probably bi, but what I present to the world is a heterosexual man. Internally I'm bi, but that's not something most people know. I'm not ashamed, but the majority of people are ignorant and close-minded," said Simon, who is 27 years old. "I am not openly bisexual to society except in sexual situations. I don't have relationships with men, I am in a relationship with my wife and only love her. I'm bisexual only with men behind closed doors," said Dustin, who is 28 years old. In addition to being perhaps the first instance in recorded history of someone comparing their sexual orientation to George W. Bush's counterterrorism doctrine, Simon's statement contains an important point. Carrillo and Hoffman note that many of their respondents simply see no real personal or social advantages that would stem from publicly adopting an identity as bisexual or gay. In many cases, it may not be in their interests to do so, hence the compartmentalization of their same-sex encounters. Another reason for such compartmentalization is that it allows some men the opportunity to explore parts of their identities they feel they couldn't safely in heterosexual settings. "For most of my sex life I'm in control of things. I'm not a boss at work anymore, but I've been in situations where I've managed 100 people at a time. I take care of my family. I take care of my kids. I'm a good father. I'm a good husband in providing material things for my wife. I'm in charge in a lot of places. There's times when I don't want to be in charge and I want someone to be in charge of me. That's what brings me over to the bisexuals. It's kind of submitting to another guy or being used by another guy," said Russell, who is 54 years old. Interestingly, write Carrillo and Hoffman, being dominated by a man seemed to them less threatening than being dominated by a steady female partner, perhaps because it could be construed as a temporary fantasy, instead of meaning a permanent change in the gender balance. This same dynamic popped up the last study on this subject I covered, the idea that men get something about sex that women don't, and that because there's a fully mutual understanding that what's going on is just sex, same-sex experiences can be set off safely away from the rest of one's heterosexual identity. You can be a good father, which many men imply to mean being a strong, straight man, while still messing around with men on the side. From these men's perspective, they can have it both ways, the privileges of identifying as straight and the pleasure and excitement of same-sex relationships on the side, without their identity being threatened.